Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Heart-Centered live broadcast where we talk about heart-centered living and leadership, focusing on the balance between intellect, emotion, and intuition. Through these conversations that we have on the broadcast, I hope to inspire you and give you the tools to help you create a better world for yourself and for all of us. Today, I have in the studio with me Paul Zelizer. Paul is the one of the leading thought leaders in this social entrepreneurship space, and he has been a business coach for entrepreneurs all over the world. And the people that he works with want to create social change through their business practices. He is the founder and chief entrepreneurial activist of a thriving membership called Awarepreneurs, and I'm sure he would want to talk more about that in a little bit. But why don't we start by telling us what drew you to the space in the first place?
Well, first of all, Lena, thank you so much for having me and all the good work that you're doing with the show. Just as somebody who hosts a show, I know the work it takes. It's an honor to hold the space, but it also takes a lot of work. So just deep bow to you for holding this space.
You're welcome, Paul.
So what drew me to this work? The short answer is for 15 years, I did work in community work. It was beautiful work. It was hard work. It was I was originally licensed as a community mental health counselor, and doing work on things like intergenerational violence and addiction and trauma, and engaging young men as fathers and positive assets to the community and restorative justice, that kind of work. It was fabulous, and it was really hard. There was a lot of trauma, a lot of addiction. I work in northern New Mexico at the time. Now I live in Albuquerque, central New Mexico. But New Mexico is the highest proportion of people of color in the United States due to our large Hispanic, Latin population and indigenous Native American population. And we're also one of the poorest states in the country. So it's beautiful, complicated, and complex healing work. And after 15 years, I burned out. I was tired. And when I was kind of unpacking about, I still wanted to help, but part of the burnout was I always felt like we were like on the outside competing for crumbs, trying to do this incredible work to make the world a better place and help families who didn't have a lot of economic reason, and all the horsepower was over here in business, right? So we were trying to do good work, but we were trying to fund the work, and you don't make a lot of money doing social work kind of stuff. And that was part of the burnout. And I was like, we got to find a way to hook up the desire to be of service and to help people who could use it the most with the horsepower and the engine and the resources of the business world. And that was 13 years ago, and that's what I've been doing for 13 years.
Oh, wow. So your work, you work with a lot of social entrepreneurs, in our conversations before. They are all over the world. Why do you think there is this increasing interest in social entrepreneurship, and why do you think more and more companies are pivoting and focusing in this space?
That's a great question. The short answer, Lena, in terms of why our company's doing it, is because they have to. That's the short answer. Social entrepreneurship is one of the fastest growing majors on campuses all over the world. Young people are kind of looking at the world and the situation we're in the world, and it's kind of a mess out there, right? And values and a sense of like, what's the impact of a company or a business or an organization? What are they having? They're asking that question at unprecedented rates. Values and the positive impact. Does a company have positive impact, or is it just selling widgets, right? Is it just, hey, we buy more t-shirts or whatever the company makes? Those kind of brands are, malls all over the US are going out of business. Big retailers like, JCPenney and the Gap are like falling apart because they don't have these. Young people are looking at them and saying, you're just trying to sell us stuff. And we're not interested
Yeah.
in stuff for stuff's sake. We're looking at, if we choose to engage with a business, is the world a better place? And if it's not, they're taking their business to companies that are. And that's happening at such a rate that even very, very large companies who historically haven't thought about this are starting to get the message that if they want to thrive or maybe even survive, they have to.
So if the consumer is not interested just in buying widgets anymore, what are they really interested in? What do they want from these companies?
Ideally, what they want is companies that care about communities and real humans and have thought about it in some way. And we can, talk about some examples, but that, all right, I need a pair, let's say you need a pair of shoes. You can buy from a company that's just like, hey, doing marketing as usual and, maybe produces those shoes in a factory in China or some country where people are not, their workers are not treated very well. And the things that go into those shoes are polluting the water and having bad effects. And then you have a choice now to buy shoes from a company that's thought a lot about where they sourced the materials and what is it, what happens to the water in the places where they make the shoes, and what is it like to be somebody who works for that company.
Yeah.
And you need shoes either way, but we now have a choice about where we buy our shoes, and that's true for our clothing, our shoes, our food, even service businesses. People are asking those questions at unprecedented rates.
How do you think it's easy? Or rather, the question is whether how easy is it to for a traditional company that sells widgets to pivot and focus on being a social enterprise?
It's a great question, Lena. There's layers of depth to how much companies, and even it's a new conversation. So business hasn't historically done a very good job of this, especially in, let's say, a place like the United States, which historically has been what we would call single bottom line. Just go make money, go sell stuff, right? That's what business is for.
Shareholder wealth maximization has always been the metrics, or has predominantly been the metrics in U.S. corporate.
And what we now know, though, is so single bottom line is how we would talk about that kind of company. Just sell more stuff. That's the only thing that matters in business. Single bottom line. Now we have what people are calling triple bottom line, which typically would stand for people, profits, and planet, right? Those companies that have values and are thinking about things like their impact on environment and are doing a better job of taking care of their people, for instance, not that they haven't been impacted, but the impact of the current financial crisis on those companies that have been thinking about how they treat their workers and the people that live in the communities where they produce and operate their businesses, those companies are doing off the charts better. So for instance, green investment funds, we have a partnership with Awarepreneurs with an investment fund called Conscious Capital Wealth Management, which is a wealth management company that has looked very deeply at these issues. And Conscious Capital Wealth Management, the assets, the members who have invested their money with them, they are doing way better than just in terms of the stock prices and the funds that people have invested in they're doing way better than the stock market in general, because the stock market in general is still pretty much single bottom. Just go out there and make money. Those companies have been hit by orders of magnitude more decline than the companies that are doing business in these more, let's pay attention to values and look at more than, not that they don't care about profit, but they're looking at more than one thing. And those companies are doing much better on the stock market and haven't seen anywhere near the kind of decline as the ones who are only looking at single bottom line.
And do you think that the reason why they appear to be more sustainable in this difficult time period is because of the way they've tried to incorporate the triple bottom line into their.
Absolutely. People are more loyal to a company that has a message. If the company is just, we're here to sell you shoes, and the shoes are sexy or they're whatever, they got all these features on them, you know, whatever, I'll either buy the shoes or I won't. But a company that has a story, we're not just here to sell you shoes. I don't know why we're stuck on shoes today, but whatever. We're here to think about making your life better. We're here to think about our employees. We're thinking about the person who made, how was the leather or the faux leather made and harvested, and the people who made that. We're thinking, a classic example is Tom Shoes, right? Tom Shoes is what we would call a buy one, give one model, one common example of social enterprise. So somebody I need a pair of shoes, I buy them from Tom Shoes. They're, sustainably sourced, and they try to take care of their workers in a good way. And when I buy a pair of shoes here in the United States from Tom's, they give a pair of shoes usually to a child in a country where even something as simple as buying a pair of shoes is really difficult to do. And that having a pair of shoes has really significant health outcomes. If you walk around barefoot in places that don't have, let's say, good water or sewage treatment, and your bare feet mean that you can get things through your feet that are really bad for, that have really bad health consequences. So if you have a pair of shoes, it's actually a public health issue to wear shoes in those places. So Paul buys a pair of shoes and sitting here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and somebody in a place where a public health benefit to wearing shoes, a kid, and I needed shoes either way, right? But I feel more engaged in doing business with a company. And those companies have a story that isn't just, let us sell you the sexiest pair of shoes. They're saying, we're going to sell you long-lasting, quality-made shoes. And at the same time, you're getting the benefit of nice shoes produced in a sustainable way. Our workers are happy and that we take good care of them. And here's a kid who's benefiting from the fact that you choose to buy your shoes from us as a company. The loyalty and the willingness to go back and to tell, hey, Alina, you need a pair of shoes? You should go buy them from this company rather than that company, because you don't just get shoes when you buy shoes. That's how it works for a company that chooses to operate in this way.
I like the buy one free get free one, or give one free model, and I don't know if you ever read this interview, and I'm trying to remember where I got that interview. Where I got the interview from, but it was where the founder of Warby Parker was being interviewed about starting the company and some of the challenges he encountered as he started the company. One of the things he had said initially was when they tried to sell to, I think it was the US market, that they were giving one free, that was the message, buy one and we'll give one free. It didn't take, the company did not take off until they put that in the backdrop, you know what I mean? And they started telling people, okay, you're buying good quality glasses.
Right.
And so I was just wondering what you thought about that, whether the US consumer, and I don't remember when that conversation, when that interview happened, and I don't know whether the perception of social enterprises have changed since. But I was just wondering if you could comment a little bit on that if you have a social enterprise, the message, the thing that you sell isn't really so much the message as opposed to, we're giving you a great product. And oh, by the way, we are doing this as well.
Yeah, that's a great question, Lena. First of all, I just want to acknowledge your daughter. She's adorable.
Yes, and I've been telling her, I have this interview. Please do not interrupt.
Here we are in the new era. Yes, so I just want to welcome her energy here.
Thank you.
Any listener who's trying to do business in this new time, and you're a parent, just a deep bow to you. see, it's more mature market than it was when this first started, right? So
Right.
back in the day when you were there's a whole, if anybody's interested, buy one, give one is just one example of many, many, many examples. It's a more mature field than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. There's a whole website called B1G1. I believe it's .com. We can look it up and put it, B1G1.com, which is all about the buy one, give one model, right? So just the fact that there's a website and a whole community just devoted to that model, that didn't exist 10 years ago or even 5, right? So it's a much more mature market. And, 10 years ago, just the fact that you were doing that was very innovative and there was hardly anybody doing it. And you would bring that into the marketplace and tell that story and you'd get a lot of traction. And now it's 10 years later, it's not as innovative. So you can't lean on that too heavily because so you're doing it in a lot of other people. So we have to pay attention to that the market is moving. And I think that's a great thing that more people are doing this, but we just have to be careful. We're not using a strategy that worked 10 years ago. Because social enterprise has grown and this whole idea of values-based business is a much more common and dynamic conversation, which I'm thrilled about, means that what worked 10 years ago doesn't necessarily work right now. And that's certainly one of the changes. This is no longer such a out of the box, I've never heard of this. This is so cool thing.
Yeah. So that explains the interview, why it didn't quite resonate with people at that time.
You have to know that this is a very dynamic conversation and you got to keep up with what's happening now, which is why, understanding social enterprise and how much the market has moved and is likely to continue to move in that direction is really important for businesses right now.
Yeah, which explains why companies like Patagonia has kind of incorporated the environmental protection into their entire website. You cannot think about, right.
You have to bake it into the whole DNA of everything you're doing and look at who you are and what are you selling product or service why and who is your customer, and they're getting much more sophisticated. It used to be you could just it's called greenwashing. You could just put on a thin veneer. Hey, we have a buy one, give one thing or what. Now it has to be baked into the whole DNA and what's called product market fit. You have to have something that people really want and they're excited about. You can't just tack on a little, we do this little green thing or this little social enterprise thing and you should now buy it. No, people are going to look at you as a holistic, who are you? Do you understand who I am and what my needs are as the customer for your product and service? And do you really fit values-wise and product-wise for what I need and want in my life? And I have a lot more choices as a customer for for businesses that are thinking this way. And if you, again, come in with a thin veneer, it actually can work against you. You just feel like you're kind of you're just kind of jumping on a bandwagon in a way that's not very well thought out. And your ability to get traction as a business it doesn't work because, again, we're not where we were 20 years ago.
Yeah. And that makes sense. That explains why companies that say we give a percentage of our profits to this nonprofit or we give doesn't really resonate with today's consumer.
There are companies that have walked very deeply into those waters and have really thought about who they are and everybody who works there and how they're relating with their customers or their clients in very deep and thoughtful ways. And then somebody who says, we give 3% to a nonprofit, that's great, but you and everybody else, so what?
Yeah, exactly. So for companies that, and then I know we've had this conversation before, and you kind of touched on it in just now, but for companies who want to build the social impact into their DNA, what do they look for? What kind of things do with a company who's interested, or with someone who's listening in who wants to move into the space, what kind of things would they have to consider to fit into this new DNA of the company?
That's a great question, Lena. I like to invite people to ask 4 questions in the right order. So what typically people do is jump to how. How do we do this, right?
Right.
And it's a great question, but I want to ask 3 questions before you ask how. The first question is why. Why do you exist as a company? Why do you do what you do? Why are you passionate about whatever it is, this kind of service or these kind of clothes or this kind of food? Why do you exist?
Yeah. And the answer cannot be to make money. Correct.
If that's your only answer,
Yeah.
and then you're like, but we want to like also give a little bit to nonprofits, so you'll buy more. It's not. There are people who've gone deeper than you have, and you're not likely to win in this new economy, particularly as millennials are stepping into leadership and making more money and making big purchase decisions, and boomers, where this was less true, is that they're aging out of the economy. They're working less and retiring and downsizing. So this is only going to continue, right? So why? And I can't answer that for you. There is no like, if you answer this, you're going to make no. This
It's
is
not it's not a multiple choice.
Cutter. Exactly. There is no cookie cutter. You have to do the work. And if you don't do the work, you are in a marketplace where other people have.
So this involves kind of like a soul searching for the company, right? Engage your stakeholders, your employees, your C-suite if you're at that level.
Everybody in the company, whether you're a solo business or you have 100,000 employees, you need to have that deep soul searching conversation such that it's resonant, it's authentic. You can't fake it. You can't. If Alina has a why and Paul likes Alina's why and tries to steal it, well, Paul's not Alina. So Alina's getting traction with her business and Paul's not. And Paul's like, but I'm saying that Paul and Alina are different humans with slightly different audiences and nuances, and we look different and we're from different cultures. Like there's lots of ways. It just, you can't take somebody. You have to have your why.
Right. Okay, so a really strong why, that's the first thing.
Yeah, and that means looking at your values and lots of layers of why, right? That we can, somebody can get a hold of me if you have questions about, but we don't have time for in this interview. Do some soul searching on your why.
Okay.
Simon Sinek, Start With Why. He has a he's a great resource that'll help you deepen down into that why question. If you're,
and he has a TED Talk too, that
one of the most watched TED Talks on planet Earth. He's awesome, right? Start With Why is his book, and that's his TED Talk. I believe it's named also. The next question is who? So I know what my values are, or the reason I'm doing the work that I do. I sell this product, or I have these services, or, you know, like underneath the actually the third question is going to be the what. But the why is why I started the business and what I'm trying to, the impact I'm trying to have. The next question is who? Who am I trying to engage? It's a nuanced marketplace, and a mentor of mine says, when you try to engage everybody, you engage nobody.
Yeah.
So who is Alina trying to connect with and help, and who is Paul? And, you know, so once I know my why, then I start thinking about the nuances. And if I'm Patagonia, it sounds or feels different than if I'm Nike, or or I was thinking of a food brand. Think of like Organic Valley, right? Or whatever. Like if the differences of the who and the way Patagonia, somebody who shows up as a loyal customer to Patagonia each, time, it's holiday time and I need to give a gift, and I'm going to give something that lasts, that, it's Mother's Day for Lena and she loves to hike. So I'm going to get her a Patagonia product because I know it might last for the rest of her life. And she's a real outdoors woman. And I give it knowing that Patagonia's thought a lot about who they source, and Alina is a good match. And when I give her a Patagonia thing, if she really is that kind of outdoors person, it means she wears that both because it's a quality product, but also she knows the values. If she really is that kind of person. Same thing if it's food, and I go out and I buy my family Organic Valley or whatever. It means something when I put that on the table, and I'm a mom who wants to feed my kids in paying attention to the nutrition or whatever, right? The who matters because your messaging and just the whole culture. Who do you hire? If you're Patagonia and you're Organic Valley, you want to hire different people who have different hobbies, and there might be some overlap, but there's also a lot of differences, right?
Yeah.
So the
Because,
who you're trying to connect with will inform lots of things about both the products, but also the way you're talking about your company when you're doing your marketing and communications.
oh, so that's so great. So when you are clear about who you're marketing to, your message becomes more targeted and you're able to connect with the people who hopefully will resonate with your message.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I like to call it empathy-based marketing, right? And
Okay.
that's really powerful. And what that means is, like, if I'm a client of Alina's work or somebody who listens to this interview show, Alina
Mhm.
gets me. She's like me. She talks my language. She understands. She gets. Yeah, she knows
Mm.
me. She understands who I am. And you can't fake that.
Yeah.
And if you do harm to your reputation by not respecting that empathy, it's hard to recover from. But if you
Yeah.
get that right, loyal customers or loyal clients who stay with you through time is the most graceful and most beautiful way to grow a business. Or people like Seth Godin. Seth Godin talks about stop marketing to strangers, right?
Mm.
In other words, build that loyal base. And a big part of it is, okay, I know why I started my business. Now, who is this person that I'm obsessed with helping or serving?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's so great. So you need to know your why, your who, and then you had said that the third question you get people to ask is a what question.
So what is it? Okay, now that I know why and now I know who, I really have a sense of the humans both. Let me just back up to the who for a second. We're talking both demographics.
Mm-hmm.
They're people in this age range, or they might have certain professions, the outside things you can measure or point to. Maybe they live in certain, they live very urban or they're rural, whatever it is, right? And then what was I going to say? Oh, okay. Once I know that, and psychograph, sorry, demographics and psychograph. What are they like on the inside, right? What motivates them? How do they approach their life? What are their values? And also, like, what are the things you can't measure, but it matters, right? Again, somebody who's passionate about the outdoors, they'll do strange things, like on their time off go like sleep in the snow or like trudge through the mud. And it's not just what they do for a living, it's the fact that they have us, this is what they think is fun. That's
Yeah.
a certain wiring, and they talk about their life and their time outdoors. And almost I'm a huge outdoors person. Nature is my church. It's
Yeah.
like, it's literally the single most powerful spiritual context in my life. And so you could know I'm 52 years old and I'm a business consultant and all that's important. But if you understand that nature is my church,
Yeah.
boy, you want to talk about empathy, right?
Yeah.
You want to
Yeah.
talk about understanding how Paul
Mhm.
makes choices about what he spends his money on. You get that.
Yeah.
Boy, you've got some really powerful empathy to use. Use it wisely. Don't try to use it in a transactional way. But if you want to sell to this guy, you might want to know that nature is my church. That's an
I
example of a
love that.
psychographic, right?
I love that because if you look at Patagonia's website, every single sentence and picture and look has that feel, right? Right from the image, the imagery, of people snowboarding, and then the next image is someone who's fly fishing. And that will resonate so much for people like you, who say that, yeah, nature is my church.
Yeah. So that's the who. Again, a deep dive. Notice we haven't even talked about what the jackets that Patagonia sells yet. Now we're
Right.
going to get to the what. But
Mhm.
if I'm one of Patagonia's customers, I understand their why. I get it. When their founder started it, because he was a mountaineer and he kept like watching things just disintegrate because he was in the mountains in the snow and he didn't have the right equipment and he was like really tired of it. I get that he started it for a certain reason. And I also get who they are and who their employees are, who their customers are, who follows them on social media. And it, like you said, it's people who treat the outdoors as a sacred experience. And yes, I need a jacket. I want to buy it from people who know that this is my church, and I don't want this cheap thing from some big box retailer that's going to last for 7 trips and then blow out the elbow in the middle of a rainstorm, right?
Yeah, we've had experience with plenty of those as well.
Right. Yeah. So that's why, that's an example of why, and then how. Now we get to what is the right product for somebody who treats the outdoors as a church versus somebody who is looking for the cheapest rain jacket they could find, or the food wise, somebody who's looking to buy eggs at just what's the absolute cheapest thing I can, or like, I want something that I can feed my family and trust. This is the highest nutrition value, and it's produced in a way that the farmer and the person who drives the truck to deliver it to the store all feel taken care of and valued, and they have health insurance and they get time off. Those are different. Yes, they're both eggs, but they're not the same eggs, right? Yeah. So it's why, then it's who, then it's what, and lastly, it's how. And then notice that's not, it's not some new market. Oh, Instagram's really hot, or you should do video. Yeah, all that matters. I like to pay attention to marketing trends, but mostly the companies that are thriving, it's whether they're doing it on Instagram or a video marketing strategy or the podcast, whatever they're doing, they're getting more traction. That I call it marketing by shiny objects. Video is really hot right now. Yeah, but if you're somebody who has this deep resonance on these other levels, you can either do video or not. You'll find a way to connect. The people who you're right for will feel your resonance the way it's baked into the whole DNA of what you're doing, in a way that goes beyond just video is hot right now.
Yeah. So do you think it's primarily the content and what comes across as opposed to the medium that matters?
People are looking for companies that have a deep values fit. Does it matter if you send out a newsletter and you don't do video right now, or vice versa? You do a lot of video and your newsletter, you send it out once in a while. As long as you're steadily showing up somehow, I call it steady, loving presence in the marketplace. Somehow you're regularly, I love podcasting. I love, because it's an interview like this. You don't have to do sound bites, and I love podcasting. And people who follow me know how much both my own hosting my own podcast, but now I'm also doing a lot of what I would call a podcast tour, guesting on other shows like this. Thank you for having me. I love being in deep dialogue, right? It fits who I am and how I'm wired. I've had people say, you know what, Paul, I used to hate podcasting and I still don't really love it, but I want to hear the conversations you're having. So I'm listening anyway, even though I hate podcasts, or even though I've never really been a podcast fan.
Yeah. I like that. So I think it goes back to what kind of content and what you're saying that you're putting out there that matters more than the platform, because the platform doesn't really matter. Whether you get your message across on a podcast or a newsletter or a blog, it's the same. You're going to draw in people that resonates with that message anyway,
if you're willing to do the work.
Yeah.
If you've asked yourself deeply, who is, what, why, who, what. Notice the how is the fourth question. It's not insignificant, but if you do the other 3, you're going to be okay. And if you don't do a deep dive in the other 3, then you're subject to these very whimsical market forces of videos hot right now, or Facebook changed their algorithm in Facebook Lives and other videos aren't as weighted in the algorithm. Sorry, you lose. You become at the whims of forces that are not under your influence. And I would encourage people to not be at the whims of who owns the social media platform and they wake up one day and change the algorithm and your business crashes and burns.
Yeah, I like that. So does this advice, especially number 4, does this advice apply to also companies that provide tangible things, like Patagonia, or like people like a company like Warby Parker that provides glasses? Does that apply to those companies as well?
I would say if you want to have a company that thrives in this new marketplace that we're in, increasing number of millennials and Gen Zs who are making major purchases decisions, and these like incredible fluctuations in the economy and unprecedented economic situation. We just fell off a cliff in terms of unemployment. We're certainly in a recession and maybe headed to something equivalent to the Great Depression.
Yeah.
If you want to thrive in these times, ask yourself those questions. I don't care what you're selling. If you want to thrive as a business, this is the new reality. People are, not everybody, but an increasing percentage of the marketplace are looking at who are you and what are you all about? Because every dollar I spend is precious now.
That's so great. So those are the 4 questions that you would encourage anyone in any space that's concerned about social impact and thinking about having a social enterprise. Those are the questions that you should ask.
Only if you want to stay in business. If you only if you don't want to stay in business, don't ask those questions.
Exactly right. Only if you want to be relevant, right?
Only if you want to be relevant. If you want to make some money, you might want to ask these questions. If you don't care about making money, don't worry about them.
That's so great. So can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do with Awarepreneurs? So
Sure.
that's your membership community, of which I'm a member of. So I would like for the audience to know about the work that you do with your members.
Sure. And thank you for being a member. It's such an honor to be in community with you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Paul.
The way to understand Awarepreneurs is the intersection. If you know what a Venn diagram is, like intersecting circles, right?
Yeah.
So one of the circles is what we call conscious business, doing business in a values way, values-led way.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can pull that up and maybe I can show that to the audience. But
it's on the homepage on awarepreneurs.com. Yeah, it's a big graphic. Yeah. So conscious business and social impact, having positive impact, not just selling stuff, but also thinking about how does this business make the world a better place in some tangible way. And we can give examples if you want of that. So those 2 circles overlapping. And then the last one is what we call awareness practices. That can be being in nature as an awareness practice, or I meditate 7 minutes every day. I'm busy, but I got 7 minutes, right? Some way of having a self-care and resiliency practice in these really poignant times. There's a lot of research. If anybody wants to know more about it in a business context, a good book for that is Search Inside Yourself, which is a book about Google has now taught tens of thousands of employees a simple mindfulness and emotional intelligence program called, they're a search company, so they call the program Search Inside Yourself. And there's so much research in that book about why it's really, really helpful for business leaders and people who want to perform well in a stressful, high-paced economy like working at Google, or business environment, like working at Google. It's just, there's a ton of research why it matters. So that's what Awarepreneurs is. Conscious business, social impact, and awareness practices. Right in the intersection of those things, we feel like that's where business is doing the most good and having the most impact and is most likely to thrive and survive in this economy we find ourselves in.
And I'm trying to see.
There it is. That's the Venn diagram right there.
Yeah. So that's what you do with the group. Could you talk a little bit more specific about the activities that you have?
Sure.
And what a member would expect?
Absolutely.
Or what someone who's considering a membership might expect?
I like to talk about what's in front of a paywall and what's behind a paywall to maybe help understand not just our business, but what we encourage people to do. So in front of a paywall, we have a well-known podcast. We just went from 1 episode a week to 2 episodes a week because people are really excited. There were so many people approaching us with great stories about how they're doing business and incorporating these things. So we have 121 episodes. We just published our 121st episode. So the podcast is a way for us to help get the stories out there. And they're deep dive interviews, about 55 minutes. So the most recent one, for example, is with a fabulous man named Peter Sanchez. Peter, incredible social entrepreneur, grew up on the west side of Albuquerque, New Mexico, from a family that had been in the area for over 400 years, a Hispanic family. Became an accountant, went to Silicon Valley, became a lawyer, became a chief financial officer of very large tech companies in Silicon Valley, did 20 years in Silicon Valley, that whole environment. And then when he had kids, wanted to come home to New Mexico. He wanted to raise his kids in the culture and not in Silicon Valley, even though he was really grateful for his experience. The way he got back home work-wise is there was there's something called a land grant in New Mexico where land is commonly owned for the benefit of the families who live in that area. A lot of that land was grazing land, and people weren't grazing anymore. So they actually sold the land, took the money, and used it as a startup fund for a social enterprise to benefit the local people, the local residents of Albuquerque. They became known as the Atrisco companies. Peter is now the CEO of the Atrisco companies, which is 7 social enterprises that are all under one umbrella. The way I found out about him is my favorite social enterprise in New Mexico is called Fathers Building Futures. What they do is when men, and it's mostly men of color because that's who gets incarcerated in America, more, people of color and poor people, men coming out of prison who traditionally, if anybody knows about the incarceration cycle, recidivism rates are really high because somebody's been incarcerated. They usually get incarcerated young, and then they come out after, if they've been there for a long time for a serious offense. Who's going to hire somebody coming out of prison? Who's going to support, they go back to families that love them, but didn't have a lot of resources to begin with and don't have any more when they come out. And it's a painful cycle to watch. What Fathers Building Futures does is they have a woodworking shop. They do everything from cutting boards to caskets, cabinets and custom cabinets in your kitchen, all kinds of, if it's made out of wood, they can do it. And they take guys coming out of prison and they teach them, they use this woodworking business to help them build real world marketing skills, right? Business skills. So here's how you operate, the tools to build cutting boards, or maybe you want to learn marketing. So you become in the marketing team for this company, and they just walk you with a whole wraparound support. It's all run with and by guys who've been in this scenario, and suddenly the recidivism goes down, and these guys are all fathers, by the way. Suddenly these guys who would normally be chewed up and spit out by our incarceration system have real jobs, and they're showing up for their kids, and we're breaking this cycle of intergenerational trauma and incarceration. They're really doing I love stuff. So Fathers Building Futures came under this umbrella of these 7 social enterprises run by Peter and his team. We got a lawyer and all the things that nonprofits and social enterprises don't tend to do so well, like bookkeeping and marketing and IT and other things like that. Peter and his team take care of it so that the good people who are doing the programmatic work at these 7 social enterprises like Fathers Building Futures can focus on the program and know like they got a world-class CFO in Silicon Valley kind of guy and his team running the business part of it, and they can just focus on doing really, really, really good work programmatically. And what happens is they tend to see 10x scaling of what they're doing like 5 or 10 years with each of these 7 companies. That it's just a fabulous model of collaborative resources and letting people do what they're good at instead of, somebody who's really good at programs, but, they're not a lawyer and a CPA. They don't know how to run it at that level. So it's just a fabulous model. Super excited. We interview Peter, unpack how he does it, tell all the stories, give it all away for free. And that's what's going out into the world in a front of the paywall kind of a way, right?
Right.
Behind the paywall, what we have is 300 people like you, Alina, and Peter's a member, who are doing this work in a very thoughtful, intentional way and are sharing with each other about what's the real of growing these kinds of businesses. Where right now we have a LinkedIn pod of like 15, actually we have 2 of them, 15 people who are learning how to use LinkedIn more skillfully and giving each other feedback. Oh, I love this about your profile, or what if you tweaked it this way? And we're commenting on each other's posts and really like up-leveling our LinkedIn game. Or we're about to do a whole initiative about a podcast tour. This is actually part of my podcast tour, getting ready to teach our Awarepreneurs community members, if they want to, how they can do their podcast tour. Or make a referral. I need a website for this kind of social enterprise business. Who gets us and can do a website that really is A, affordable, but B, really is effective for a social enterprise? Who does Facebook ads? Who can do a logo? All that kind of nuts and bolts, and also emotional support for somebody who wants to grow this kind of business. That's what we do in the community.
Yeah. And you also have a Facebook group where you do regular check-ins with the members and all that as well.
That's the mechanism for it's for members where we can stay in touch with each other. We do live calls, master classes on different topics related to this. There's a whole bunch going on, and the Facebook group is the most frequent way we stay in touch with each other between things like calls and other ways we communicate with each other.
Yeah. And this is the site that we have for people to get in touch with you. And your social media handles are all accessible on Awarepreneurs.
Exactly. Yeah, we're really active on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. I have a person, that you can follow us on, and what's the latest podcast episode, or somebody just launched David Wetton, who's a community member, on our Facebook page. Literally right before the show, David launched a new podcast called Conscious Leaders Now, which is looking at, you two need to talk if you, right? Because it's pretty similar to what you're doing in terms of heart-centered leadership. So, when somebody launches something in the community, that's a way. If you're not quite sure if you want to be a member, it's not right for you to be a member, check out our Facebook page. We're really active on LinkedIn. You can connect with me there. We're on Instagram, a little less active on Twitter, although I am there. So.
Yeah, and all the channels to connect with you would be accessible through this website.
Exactly, right down at the bottom in the footer are LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all there right on the site.
Thank you, Paul. Before we end this interview, and I know we're kind of running late, we're running towards the end of our time here. For people who are tuning in now, or who may one day come across this interview and listening, what would your advice be to anyone who's interested in the social entrepreneurship space?
It's a great question, Alina. Just go back to those 4 questions, especially the first 2. Why are you doing it, and who are you trying to help? And if you do your work there, you're going to get traction. If you don't do your work and you're just kind of like, well, I want a piece of the pie from the social enterprise space too. Yeah, that would have worked 10 years ago, but it's not working so well now.
Yeah. You wouldn't gain traction if you didn't do the deep soul searching work.
There's never any guarantees in business, but certainly the percentages of folks who, every year, every month, it feels like, because this is all growing so quickly, especially now. Every month it's harder than the month before if you haven't done the work to get traction. And every month when you have done the work, it's clear and it stands out, and people can feel There's something going on. You don't have to tell. Don't make a big. We did our deep dive on. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Let the work that you do speak for itself. And if you really have done the work, people will notice.
In this interview, we're doing it, a few weeks into the COVID-19 shutdown and all that. And I, I'm sure we've had this conversation before that a lot of a lot of shifts have happened, with people, and they're going to expect different things once we come out of this and have a new environment.
We're in an unprecedented time, and I've heard it called the transactional economy. Just go out there and sell stuff, and people should buy things just for the purpose of buy things. That just came to a halt in a way that nobody could have predicted. But yeah, we are now like, it just stopped.
Yeah. And who knows what's going to come out of this?
We don't know, but again, early signs from really smart people who like conscious capital wealth management, folks who are really staying on top of the trends in the marketplace and are analyzing it, are saying where it didn't stop, when people still have to buy, we still have to buy food, right?
Yeah.
If you eventually you're going to have to buy shoes or the new jacket, or it's going to be Mother's Day soon, you're going to probably buy something for your mom to say thank you for being an awesome mom. Those companies that have these kinds of authentic stories, it hasn't stopped. Some of them have experienced a slowdown, but not off a cliff like the transactional economy.
I love it. So on that note, Paul, I want to say thank you for coming on the show. It's as always a great pleasure to talk to you.
It's such an honor to be in community with you. And again, just thank you for these kinds of, it's my true belief, Alina, that dialogue is what changes the world. Really honest, meaningful conversation, that you're holding a space week after week for that kind of space. So just thank you for holding that.
Thank you, Paul.